All right. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry for those past couple days that I didn't go live. I wasn't able to. But today we're back with some stories about Karlson. Um, and as you may remember last time, Smidge was at Karlson's house on the roof, and he helped him clean up, and they were just kind of fooling around. So today's chapter 3, and the chapter is called Karlson Tirritates a Creepy Crawley. Here we go. While Smidge was up at Karlson's, Mum had been at the doctor's. It took longer than she expected, and by the time she finally got home, Smidge was sitting quietly in his room, looking at his stamps. "Hello, Smidge," said Mum. "Busy with your stamps as usual?" "Yes," said Smidge. After all, it was true. He didn't say that he had been up on the roof not long before. He knew Mum was clever and understood almost everything, but he wasn't absolutely sure she would understand about climbing roofs. Smidge decided not to say anything about Karlson. Not for now. Not until the whole family had gathered. It would be a big surprise to spring on them at the dinner table. Actually, Mum wasn't looking very happy. She had a frown line between her eyes that wasn't usually there. Smidge wondered why. Then the rest of the family came home, and it was dinner time, and they all sat around the table together. Mom and Dad and Seb and Sally and Smidge. They had stuffed cabbage leaves, and as usual, Smidge just poked the cabbage apart and left it. He didn't like cabbage. He only liked the bit inside. Lying at his feet under the table was Bumble, and he would eat absolutely anything. Smidge folded the cabbage leaves into a soggy little parcel and passed them down to Bumble. "Mom, tell him he's not to do that," said Sally. "Bumble's going to get unbearable, just like Smidge." Yes," said Mum. "Yes." But she didn't seem to listen. "I had to eat everything when I was little, said Sally. Smidge stuck out his tongue at her. "Oh, did you? Well, it doesn't seem it has done you much good." That made tears well up in Mum's eyes. "Don't squabble, please," she said. "I can't bear to hear you." And then at last she told him why she wasn't happy. "The doctor said I was anemic, totally exhausted," he said. "I've got to go away for a rest, though goodness knows how." There was complete silence around the table. No one said a word for a long time. What awful news. Mum was sick, and they all felt really sad about it. And she'd got to go away as well, which Smidge thought was even worse. "I want you to be standing in the kitchen every day when I get home from school, in your apron, baking buns," said Smidge. "All you ever think of is yourself," said Seb sternly. Smidge hugged Mum tightly. "Well, there won't be any buns otherwise," he said. But Mum wasn't listening again. She was saying something to Dad. "We'll have to try to get a home help, but goodness knows how." Mum and Dad both looked upset. It was nothing like as nice at the dinner table as usual. Smidge realized something had to be done to cheer everyone up a bit, and who better to do it than him? "Guess what, though? Something great's happened," he said. "Guess who's come back?" "Who?" "Oh dear, not Karlson," said Mum. "Don't tell me why we've got to worry about now as well." Smidge gave her a reproachful look. "I think it's fun having Karlson around. Not a worry," Seb laughed. Well, we're in for a wild time here." "No, Mum, just Karlson and the home help running riot about the place. Don't scare the life out of me," said Mum. "What if the home help sees Karlson? What will happen then?" Dad looked at Smidge severely. "Nothing will happen at all. The home help mustn't see Karlson or hear word about him. Promise, Smidge?" "Karlson flies wherever he likes," said Smidge. "But I promise not to say anything about him." "Not to a soul," said Dad. "Don't forget what we agreed to." "No, not to a soul," said Smidge. "Only to Miss at school." Dad shook his head. "Most certainly not to your teacher. Not on any account." "Huh," said Smidge. "Well, then I definitely shouldn't say anything about the home help either, because a home help is much worse than Karlson, that's for sure." Mum sighed. "We don't even know that we'll be able to get a home help," she said. But she put an advert in the newspaper, and the very next day, only one person answered. Her name was Miss Crawley. and she arrived a few hours later for an interview for the job. Smidge happened to have earache just then and wanted to be as close to Mum as possible, preferably sitting on her lap, though he was really too big for that. But when you've got an earache, you have to, said Smidge, climbing into his mother's lap. Then there was a ring at the door. It was Miss Crawley. Smidge wasn't allowed to stay on Mum's lap, but the whole time Miss Crawley was there, he hung about beside the Mum's chair, pressing his poorly ear against her arm and moaning a bit whenever he felt a twinge of pain. Smidge had hoped Miss Crawley would be young, pretty, and kind, a bit like his teacher at school, but she was just the opposite, a stern, elderly lady who seemed to have very firm opinions. She was tall and sturdily built, had several chins, and what's more, the sort of angry eyes Smidge was so afraid of. He immediately knew he did not like her, and Bumble must have felt the same way because he barked for all he was worth. Oh, there's a dog, said Miss Crawley. Mum looked worried. Don't you like dogs, Miss Crawley? She asked. I do if they're trained well. I don't know that I'd call Bumble well trained exactly, said Mum, a bit embarrassed. Miss Crawley nodded energetically. But he will be if I decide to take this job. I've dealt with dogs before. Smidge hoped fervently that she wouldn't decide to. Then he felt a twinge in his ear and couldn't help but give a little moan. Well, well, dogs that growl and kids that howl, said Miss Crawley with a hint of a smile. It was meant to be a joke, but Smidge didn't think it was a very funny one. And he said quietly, as if to himself, and my shoe squeaked too. Mum heard him. She blushed and said quickly, Hope you like children, Miss Crawley. I expect you do, don't you? Yes, if they're well trained, said Miss Crawley, fixing Smidge with a stare. Mum had that embarrassed look again. I don't know what I'd call Smidge well trained exactly, she mumbled. But he will be, said Miss Crawley. Just you wait, I've dealt with children before. Smidge was scared now. He felt so sorry for the children Miss Crawley had dealt with before. Now he was going to be one of those children himself. No wonder he looked terrified. Mum seemed a bit doubtful too. She stroked Smidge's hair and said, With this one, kindness is what works best. But it doesn't always help, I've noticed, said Miss Crawley. Children need a firm hand sometimes. Then Miss Crawley announced how much she would like to be paid and that she was to be called housekeeper rather than home help, and everything was decided. Then Dad arrived home from the office, and Mum introduced their visitor. Our housekeeper, Miss Crawley. Our creepy Crawley, said Smidge. Then he shot out of the room as fast as he could. Bumble ran after him, barking furiously. And the next day, Mum went off to Granny's. Everybody cried when she went, Smidge most of all. I don't want to be left alone with creepy Crawley, he sobbed. Because that was how it was going to be. He knew it. Seb and Sally were at school until late afternoon, weren't they? And Dad didn't get back from work until 5 o'clock. For hours and hours of every day, Smidge would be left to struggle with creepy Crawley all by himself. That was why he was crying. Mum gave him a kiss. Now try to be a good boy for me. And whatever you do, don't call her creepy Crawley. The misery started the very next day when Smidge got home from school. There was no Mum ready and waiting in the kitchen with hot chocolate and buns, just Miss Crawley, and she didn't seem at all pleased to see him. Snacks between meals spoil your appetite, she said. There won't be any buns here. But she had made buns all the same. There was a whole plate full of them, cooling by the open window. Yes, but, said Smidge. No buts, said Miss Crawley. And incidentally, I don't want any children in the kitchen. Go to your room and do your homework. Hang up your coat and wash your hands. Come on, quick, march. Smidge went to his room, cross and hungry. Bumble was asleep in his basket, but he leapt up like a shot when Smidge came in. At least someone was pleased to see him. Smidge put his arms around Bumble. Has she been nasty to you too? Oh, I can't stand her. Hang up your coat and wash your hands. Shall I air out the wardrobes and wash my feet as well, eh? I usually hang up my coat without anybody having to tell me, so there. He threw his coat into Bumble's basket, and Bumble at once lay down on it and started chewing one of the sleeves. Smidge went over to the window and looked out. He stood there thinking how sorry he felt for himself and how much he was missing Mum. Then he suddenly saw something that cheered him up. Above the roof of the house opposite, Karlson was practicing his flying stunts. He was zooming to and fro between the chimney pots, and ever so often he would turn a somersault in midair, Smidge waved to him eagerly, and Karlson came whizzing over at such a speed that Smidge had to jump aside to avoid a head-on collision as Karlson zoomed in through the window. Hasten Hobson, Smidge, said Karlson. I haven't done you any harm, have I? So why are you looking so sulkily? Are you all right? No, I'm not in the slightest, said Smidge, and he told Karlson the whole sorry tale. That Mum had gone away, and they'd got a creepy Crawley instead, who nagged you and was horrible and so mean that she wouldn't even let you have a bun when you got home from school, even though there was a whole plate of them, freshly baked, on the window ledge. Karlson's eyes began to sparkle. You're in luck, he said. The world's best creepy Crawley tamer. Guess who's that? Smidge knew straight away that it must be Karlson, but he couldn't see how Karlson could do anything about Miss Crawley. I'll start by tirritating her, said Karlson. Irritating, you mean, said Smidge. Karlson didn't like stupid comments like that. If I'd meant irritating, I'd have said so. Tirritating is the same sort of thing, but more fiendish. You can hear that from how the word sounds. Smidge tried it out and had to agree Karlson was right. Tirritate sounds more fiendish. I think I'll start with a spot of bun tirritation, said Karlson, and you can help. How? Asked Smidge. Pop into the kitchen and keep Creepy Crawley talking. Yes, but, said Smidge. No buts, said Karlson. Keep her talking so she has to take her eyes off the plate of buns for a minute. Karlson chuckled. Then he turned his winder and his motor started to whir. Chuckling merrily, he lined himself up and flew out through the window, and Smidge headed boldly for the kitchen. Now he had the world's best creepy crawler tamer to help him. He wasn't scared any longer. Miss Crawley was even less pleased to see him this time. She was busy making herself some coffee, and Smidge could see she was about to treat herself to a coffee break with fresh buns. Apparently, it couldn't do adults any harm to have snacks between meals. Miss Crawley gave Smidge a sour look. What do you want? She asked, and her voice was as sour as her face. Smidge thought for a minute it was important to have something to talk about, but what on earth could he say? Guess what I'm going to do when I'm as big as you, Miss Crawley, he said in the end. At that moment he heard a whiz outside the window, and it was a whir he recognized. But he couldn't see Karlson. The only thing he could see was a podgy little hand reaching over the window sill and taking one of the buns from the plate. Smidge gave a giggle. Miss Crawley hadn't noticed anything. So what are you going to do when you get big? She said impatiently. It wasn't as if she really wanted to know. She just wanted to get rid of Smidge as soon as possible. Guess, said Smidge. Then he saw the podgy little hand swish past once more, taking another bun from the plate. And Smidge giggled. He tried not to, but he couldn't help it. There was so much giggle welling up inside him and simply bubbling out. Miss Crawley looked annoyed. She clearly thought he was the most tiresome boy in the whole world, and just when she was about to enjoy her coffee break, too. Guess what I'm going to do when I'm as big as you, he said, and then he giggled again, because he saw two little hands grabbing the rest of the buns from the plate. I haven't time to stand here and listen to your daft ideas, said Miss Crawley, and I don't care what you want to be when you get big. But as long as you're still small, you're to be polite and obedient and do your homework and get out of my kitchen. Yes, of course I will, said Smidge, giggling so much he had to prop himself up against the door. But when I'm as big as you, I'm going to go on a slimming diet, that's one for sure. Miss Crawley looked as if she was going to make a grab for him, but at that very moment, there was a sound like a mooing cow from the window. That made her suddenly turn around, and then she saw the buns were gone. Miss Crawley gave a howl. Oh, lordy, lordy, where are my buns? She dashed to the window. Perhaps she thought she would see a thief running away, his arms full of buns. But the Stevensons lived on the 4th floor, of course. She must have realized there were no thieves with legs that long. Miss Crawley, horrified at the loss of her buns, sank down in a chair. Could it be pigeons? She muttered. It sounded more like a cow, said Smidge. Maybe there's a cow out flying today, one that likes buns. Don't be stupid, said Miss Crawley. Then Smidge heard Karlson's whir outside the window again, and to stop Miss Crawley noticing it, he began to sing at the top of his voice. A cow with glittery wings comes hovering from the skies. A cow who really does love buns and steals them whatever their size. Smidge used to make up rhymes with Mom sometimes, and he thought this one about the cat wasn't bad, but Miss Crawley didn't agree. "That's quite enough of your nonsense," she cried. At that instant there was a loud chinking sound from above the window that made them both jump with fright. Then they saw what had made the sound. On the empty bun plate lay a small 5-ore coin. Smidge went off into another fit of giggles. "What an amazing cow," she said. "She pays for her buns." Miss Crawley was red in the face with rage. "What sort of stupid joke is this?" she roared, rushing to the window. "It must be somebody on the floor above who thinks it's funny to steal buns and throw coins." "There isn't a floor above," said Smidge. "We live on the top floor. It's only the roof up here." Miss Crawley was beside herself. "I don't understand it," she screeched. "I don't understand a thing." "No, so I've noticed," said Smidge. "But don't be sad about it. We can't all be clever." Then Smidge had found himself on the receiving end of a clip around the ear. "I'll teach you to be so cheeky," yelled Miss Crawley. "No, please don't," said Smidge. "Because then Mom won't recognize me when she gets home." Smidge's eyes had glazed over. He was on the verge of tears. He had never had a clip around the ear before, and he didn't like it. He glared angrily at Miss Crawley. She took him by the arm and shoved him into his room. "Now stay in there until you're sorry," she said. "I'm going to lock the door and take out the key, then maybe you'll stop pestering me in the kitchen for a while." She looked at her watch. "An hour should do, to make you into a good boy. I'll come in and lock the door at 3. Until then you can think about what you're going to say when you apologize." And Miss Crawley went and left him. Smidge heard her turning the key. Now he was locked in and couldn't get out. It felt horrible. He was absolutely furious with Miss Crawley. But he also felt a bit guilty, because he hadn't really behaved very well either. Mum would be sure to think he had teased creepy Crawley and been cheeky to her. Mum, oh yes. For a while he wondered whether he might not have a little cry after all. But then he heard a whir, and in through the window flew Karlson. But what happens next? You will find out on Friday. That's the end of today's chapter. I hope you enjoyed. And the next one is called Karlson's Invitation to a Bun Feast. So we'll see what that's all about next time. Thanks for joining me, and see you on Friday at 4.